Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Happy Saturday, April 11th. And tonight we're not going to do a call-in show. Sometimes in the evenings we do that, and please keep an eye out for the next one. We got some really good topics coming. But for tonight, we're going to do an interview, and I'm going to bring my guest on in just a moment. I just want to remind everybody of a couple of quick things. If you would like to do an interview, please reach out to me, preferably on Facebook. My handle is Harmonic Tim, or by email. My email address is HarmonicAtheist@yahoo.com. And if anyone is interested in meeting with me for one-on-one peer support, like non-clinical, I'm not a therapist, but if anyone would be interested in that, please reach out and let me know. And also, if anyone's able to support the channel, whether it's through just liking, subscribing, sharing videos, whatever you can do, please feel free to do that. And if you are able to support the channel financially, all the links are beneath this video. So appreciate all of you. And just wanted to mention as well, for the live streams where we have people call in, there are so many of you that have been giving me great ideas, both in the live streams, but also some of you have been reaching out behind, just by email or whatever, and saying, I've got some ideas. I love it. I really love it. Those are wonderful for me. So please do feel free to reach out if you have any topics you want me to try to cover. I'm wide open to suggestions. But with that in mind, I'm going to kick us off here. Tonight, we're going to be speaking with our guest, Chrissy Angelides. Chrissy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Tim. No problem at all. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And it is actually, I should say, thank you for joining us today. For you, it's nighttime. You're over there. It's 10 p.m. in the UK. So I appreciate you being willing to do this. You're much more of a night owl than I am, for sure.
No problem. It's fine.
I go kind of hard all day, and then 8:30, I'm just like, it's old man's disease. I'm done. But Chrissy Angelides, her parents are from Cyprus and Greece, but she actually grew up in London, and she's coming to us today from Essex in the UK. And she works in tech as an IT professional. And we're going to find out through her story that she grew up as a pastor's kid inside of a strict fundamentalist church, which already sounds delightful. Just that one sentence. But before we get into any of the meat of your story, if you could please tell us more about yourself and some fun things, and then we'll kick it off.
Okay. So yeah, thank you for the intro. So yeah, I am born and bred in London. Moved out to Essex a few years ago now. Love being in the countryside. I'm not sure if you're that familiar with the UK, but where I am is very rural. Lots of lovely ducks crossing the road and chickens and all sorts. So it's great. I love it. So yeah, I've got 3 cats. Big animal lover, absolutely love them. Would have a whole house of them if I could, but I'll be crazy cat lady, so probably not best to do that.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of fun facts, I don't really know what to tell you in terms of fun facts. I don't know whether you know George Michael. Apparently he is the singer. He's apparently like some long lost cousin of mine in my family tree somewhere. I don't know how true that is. It's just something I got told because Greeks know Greeks, but
nice. Very cool.
That could be true. I really don't know, but I never met the guy, so who knows?
Your claim to fame.
Yeah, my claim to fame.
Very
That's
cool.
about it. I'm afraid I'm just a normal person, like normal things. Very much into country walks and enjoying. I love nature. Absolutely love nature. I think that's one thing that's really come out of me a lot since I've come out of the faith. Just enjoying life and enjoying the people around me. Just being out in nature without any fears or any worries. Do you know what I mean? So that's one thing I'm grateful for now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I agree. It seems like just being that we're more connected to nature than we realized before, maybe as Christians, and for a lot of us, realizing evolution was part of our actual, history here on Earth. That you do feel more connected, and it makes you also just want to figure out how to be more grounded and literally grounded, but also metaphorically grounded, and also just be connected. I was out. I did a video recording this morning. I didn't post it yet, but I was out at the lake this morning. I live real close to a lake called Lake Lanier, and it's just gorgeous. And especially if you get there early, like almost no one's there. It's like it's your lake for a few minutes. But you just want to sit. You wish you could just like stop all the work and stop the world and just sit there and soak it up and just watch the sunrise every day. But I get there when I can. But we're so glad you're here. I just want to mention real quick, the UK is representing in the chat.
Woo!
So thank you, Susanna. Thank you, Susanna. And Mark says, George Michael is awesome, a really decent human being. Yeah, very cool. Well, Christy, we're so glad you're here. We love to ask people to take us back. Feel free to take us back to whatever is the best starting point for you in your childhood or whatever. Feel free to dwell there a while, dwell there just a minute, and move on to whatever's the pivot point of your story. But we'd love to just kind of hear where your journey began, especially with the being a pastor's kid. I'm sure you got some stuff to tell, and then I'll just jump in with some questions throughout your story.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Tim. So yeah, I guess like I was born and raised in a Christian household. So my dad was an evangelical, and so was my mum. They both sort of come out of Greek Orthodoxy prior to me being born. So they kind of converted anyway, quite young. But they both had quite significant stories in terms of their conversion. So my dad was, his story was more around coming off drugs, having an experience with God, and in his view, he was set free from drugs. My mum's story wasn't as extreme as my dad's, but certainly like she was very sort of believed in the supernatural side of Christianity and obviously God and the devil and everything else. So when I was born, and when I got to probably about, I don't know, maybe about 8 or 9, 10 years old, I just have distinct memories of my mum always like praying for me and taking me to church. Obviously my memories are only so much, but I do always remember being in a church or going to a church and being around people, being around the community, but not really understanding what it was about because I was a kid.
Can I ask, was their exit from the Greek Orthodox Church, was that traumatic for their families to like see that, in the sense of like, what are you doing abandoning our traditions?
Yeah, big time. They got a lot of stick, a lot of flack, because they didn't really understand. They thought you were leaving the faith. If you sort of compare the Greek Orthodoxy in terms of like Bible for Bible, they read the same scripture, but obviously Greek Orthodox have different traditions, which from a Christian or my parents' perspective, it would be like, well, that's man-made traditions. That's not what's biblical. That's not what we do now. They pray to the saints. They do this, they do that. We don't do any of that. So they were always of the, opinion, their understanding of the Bible was the correct understanding. And then trying to sort of translate that to people that don't really know the Bible. Family will say, oh, you leaving the faith, but they don't even know what their own faith is. They just go to church on a Sunday or go to, Easter or Christmas, do their little thing, or when someone dies or someone gets married or someone's christened. And that's it. That's kind of as far as their faith goes. But in terms of understanding, the actual doctrine itself and living it out and, it being a fundamental part of your life, that was something my parents lived out. So it was quite difficult for them to kind of come away from that and to live a bit of a separate life from a lot of people. They were quite segregated. So by the time I kind of was probably around, I think 10 or 11, my dad started a church. So he started a home church. So initially it was just like, they'd make friends with people. That one thing about my mum and dad, they were very like open and always welcoming to people, and they did have a heart for people, a real big heart. They always wanted to embrace, and like I think also the culture that I'm from is very hospitable. We're very like, come and eat with us, we'll feed the 5,000. And they were always like very open. So I remember like, as the church grew, my house was always full of people. And as a kid, I kind of felt like my dad gave his all to these people that were in and out of his life, right? And that most of them, in fact, probably all of them had issues. And even as a kid, I could detect that there were issues with these people. Coming from brokenness, some of them from drugs, from them difficult families, difficult marriages, all that kind of thing. But it was like a bit of a haven for these people, but it was my home. So, there was always you know, trying to kind of live my life as a kind of, now I was kind of like a teenager, trying to live my life, but also having like what people would be like, well, why have you got people singing in your front room? What is going on? Like, people would walk past our house and you could see, like, you know, people sitting in there playing the guitar, singing, praying, Bible studies. And, you know, like, my friends couldn't make sense of it. They're like, why, you know, what's going on? You know, well, why are you hanging around? Like, why is your parents got people in the house? So I was always different from everybody else because I was the only Christian, or, you know, at the time in that environment. So, you know, it was, everyone would looked at me a bit like, that's weird. She can't celebrate, you know, she can't celebrate Halloween. She's not allowed to go to certain lessons. You know, I wasn't allowed to learn certain things. I was really, it became quite stifling. So as I kind of wanted to grow older and, you know, just understand my own self, you know, understand what life was about, I had all of these rules imposed on me, which was obviously from the Bible. So from God, you know, my mum would say, you know, God says this, you got to be married, you can't, you know, you can't sleep around, you can't have boyfriends, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't worship other things, you know, God is the one, you know, you've got to trust him for everything. And there was always like these rules that were imposed. And even though I heard bits of the gospel, like, you know, I knew like Jesus had died for me, but it wasn't really a thing. My parents didn't really talk about that very much, but it was always about the spirituality of things. So there was always talk of like supernatural stuff. So my mum would say she used to get pictures and visions for people. So when people would come round, like my parents would act as kind of counselors, and my mum would get a picture for them. And, you know, she was convinced this was a spiritual gift that God had given her. My dad could speak in tongues, very kind of, you know, very sort of Pentecostally kind of vibes, if you know what I mean, would speak in tongues. He had the spirit of discernment. He really, like, you know, he would say he had the spirit of discernment. So he would pick up on things. And, you know, as a kid and you're hearing all of this, you're like, yeah, you know, why would you not believe it? Why would you think it was anything other than what's being told to you? So I was very much like believing that there was a supernatural world, there was a God, there was a devil. But I hadn't really experienced anything personally at this point. It was a belief system that I was brought into.
It's kind of surprising that they wouldn't be like barraging you with the messages of you have to make a profession of faith. When was the
really at this point? But the weird thing is, I was forced to go to church until I was 16. So I had no choice. I had to go every week. And eventually the church my dad had moved into a hall. But I was, you know, I had to go. So it wasn't like I had a choice. So at the time it was like, they wouldn't forcefully say, you need to do this. You need to, you know, you need to repent, or you need to kind of confess Christ. It was just a kind of, you know, do you believe that Jesus died for your sins? And I'd be like, well, yeah, because I mean, why wouldn't I? Because I don't know anything different. So, you know, I guess when I was quite young, I didn't have a critical thinking brain. I think that developed in me much later on. But at the time, there were little things that I think caused me to question things, but I didn't really realize that it was playing out like that. So, for example, like if I was sick, my mum would come and she would pray for me, and I would remember her being really, you know, very sort of holy in that moment, very like serious, and would pray whatever the prayer might be. And I would believe it. I would 100% believe, you know, okay, she's praying, you know, God says to ask and we shall receive, right? And that's what my mum would say, you know, you've got to believe in your heart, blah, blah, blah. I was like, I do. And then nothing would happen. And then I'd be like, that's a bit weird that nothing's happening. But, you know, I couldn't really reconcile it. I just kind of went, oh, okay, well, it didn't happen. And all right, God's not a genie, doesn't grant every prayer. But there were some prayers that were quite serious, that I'm like, why wouldn't God help me here? Or if I had a problem at school or something was going on, I'd be like, what, why would he not help? Like, I don't really understand. So questions sort of popped up in my mind as a kid. But I would just kind of put them to the side and just be like, oh, just move on, sort of thing, get on with your life. So my dad, as he kind of got more involved in the church, he kind of like followed a bit of the holiness movement. I don't know if you kind of know too much about that.
Some, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not my background, but I've heard it a number of times from the interviewees. Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's a very different animal.
Very different animal. So he became really strict. So to the point that I remember, like, one time, my parents were really weird. Like, sometimes like they wouldn't let me watch Ghostbusters because it was evil and it had spirits. But yeah, I could listen to secular music. So they kind of picked and chose the things that I was allowed to do and what I wasn't allowed to do. But I remember specifically, they actually had this poster on the wall in our dining room, and it was, I'll never forget it. And it was two paths. So you had like pictures of people, right? So you go on the path of like light, and if you follow Jesus, and it's all the pathway to heaven, all the things that you have to do to get to heaven. Then if you go down the path of the sin and the debauchery and this and this and this, you burn forever in hell. And that was on my dining room wall, and I will never forget it, because I used to look at it day in, day out and be like, I don't want to be in hell. I don't want to be in hell. And I knew that I thought hell existed, and that was probably like the biggest fear that I had. And I don't know if you know the film Thief in the Night.
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
they made me watch that at 7 years old, and I was petrified of it. Really, really afraid, watching, I'm just a child put into this room, and they're watching it with other people that are Christians, and I just got so freaked out by it. And like my parents didn't skimp in terms of teaching me the Bible, right? I knew Revelation. I knew what happened in Revelation. I knew all the things that were going to happen in the world, the Antichrist and and you don't want to be here when that happens, and blah, 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 blah. It was all very like tied into fear. So, I guess I had that built into me from a really young age. So anyway, fast forward.
Well, can I just make one quick comment? If it's any consolation to you about The Thief in the Night, the main character, the guy that was the preacher in that, his son is deconverted. I've interviewed him. His name is Jamin. So that actor's own son doesn't believe, which is pretty cool. So anyway.
Wow. Well, maybe he can tell his dad that film really fucked up a lot of people. Excuse my French, but yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
A lot to answer for. As kids as well. Well, when the film came out, we were young. I'm 47 now, so like you're talking years ago, right? So, to watch that as a child and to try and rationalize what's going on in your mind, it's horrible. Sure. So yeah, I think that my dad sort of, like I say, got into the holiness movement and became quite strict and was very much like, you can't do this, you can't do that. So we would clash quite a bit, just because I was trying to grow up, but also he was trying to kind of control the narrative in terms of like, people think we're a holy family, we're Christians, we don't do this, we don't do that. So I got to about 18 and I was like, I need to, I want to move on. I want to do something with my life, kind of thing. So I ended up meeting a guy, and as of course, because of purity culture, it was very much like, you can't live with a guy. You can't move out. You can't do anything. You can't sleep with blah, blah, blah. Right. And I really, even though I was in that motion of like, I knew when I met this person, he wasn't a Christian, but I wholeheartedly believed he would become one. That was kind of like, oh, he'll become a Christian. So I put my eggs in that basket, and because my parents wouldn't let me date him or really have a relationship with him, that I had no choice but to kind of get married. So after 4 months of knowing this person, I got married. Needless to say, it was an absolute farce. I was 18, I knew nothing about life. I was really like a really naive kid, especially being brought up in one set of principles and rules and, thought, ways of thinking, which was all aligned, biblically speaking. I didn't have any other framework for anything else. So I was kind of thrown into this life of a guy that's come out of, his own sort of terrible upbringing, learning to just be in a relationship with someone, that was quite wild in some respects. And anyway, the marriage lasted three years, but it was
Did you feel like it was a part of like a rebelliousness on your part, do you think, or you just really liked him?
No, I did like him, but I felt like I really fell for him. But I think I wanted more than just, like, he lived quite far, so it was like it just didn't make sense the way we couldn't really be together. So my mum and dad were like, you've got to get married. Like, you can't be in a relationship and not get married. So I was like, well, why can't I just get engaged? And they were like, no, it's got to be marriage or nothing.
That's so sad.
Yeah, it was sad. And, and I suffered for it for 3 years. I had a horrendous time, very abusive for many reasons. So by the time I kind of came out of that, and he did become a Christian, by the way, during that, if you can call it that, because he had an experience. And my mum and dad were fully bought in that he was converted. He was this amazing human. And I was like, you are not seeing the other side. You're just seeing like one side of the coin. So anyway, in the end, I couldn't carry on because as I say, it just got worse. So I ended up leaving the marriage. And then when I came out of that, I was pretty broken. 21, I had nothing, back then I didn't drive. I was very kind of on my own, and I kind of felt like I had to start again.
It's a lot to go through at that age.
Yeah. And I was just like, I was scared of everything, of everyone. I didn't know what to believe anymore. I was very confused, because I remember, during that period of when I was with him, I would pray, I would ask God to help me. I would ask for guidance. I would, read the Bible, looking for some sort of comfort. And I just couldn't find nothing that gave me any real clear guidance at that time. So you could say, well, you sinned, you went, you married someone who was an unbeliever. You could say all of that. And that is the position that I took for a long time, that I blamed myself. I was like, it's my fault. I should never have married him. He was an unbeliever. I'm going to do things 100% God's way next time. So I got to I think 23. So 23 years old, my sister, she starts going to this church. Anyway, she comes home one day and she's just like, oh, you've got to come to this church. You're going to love it. Oh, there's loads of people that are, your age and my age. And, you'll love it there. They're really lovely people and da, 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 da. And I was still healing from everything that had gone on, right? But I was looking for acceptance. I was looking for answers. I was looking for love, I guess you could call it, because I hadn't really had it. I'd had, I guess you could say, a really stern dad. Bless him. I love him to bits now, but when I was a kid, I just didn't. I didn't have him as a father. He wasn't there, for one reason or another. In my teenage years, where it really mattered to me, he wasn't present. And then obviously now I've gone into an abusive relationship. I've come out, so I was really okay, I am a little bit tender here. Where are you taking me? Anyhow, she ended up convincing me to go to this. They put on a skit. And these guys would do like a gospel thing, but they would act it out, and they were all really brilliant. They had like really good skills and really like they'd put on a performance and whatnot. So anyway, they did this, and I was really moved by the production, really moved by it. And at the end of it, this girl came over to me and said, "Oh, look, would you mind if I pray for you?" And I was a bit like, "Okay, sure." So she prayed for me, and she kind of seemed to know a lot about my life. And at the time, I thought, how does she know? God's obviously showing her, like my brokenness and like where I need healing. And she really spoke about, so many things that just touched me. And I was just like, oh wow, finally God's actually coming through for me. He's hearing me. He is there. Like he has seen my pain. He has been there all along. So I thought. So I'm like, oh, amazing. This is so good. So from that point, they kind of had me bought in to it. So I started going to the church every Sunday. Then we would meet during the week and we would do Bible studies. And it was a really, really lovely crowd. And the church was Pentecostal. So there was kind of a mixture of cultures. But the pastor was a black guy, but he spoke fluent Greek. So there was a mixture of like Greeks, English, black. We were quite diverse, but we were all quite young with a few older people in the mix. So it felt like home. It felt like I would go, and initially it was very loving, and it was very much about God's love, about how he's there for you. It was all positivity, right? For quite a while, actually, that I never really heard anything like from when they would preach from the Bible. They obviously preached from certain parts that were the positive stuff, right?
The nice song, the nice
stuff. Yeah, exactly. But when I would have my own time, I would look at scripture and I would think, some of this just doesn't make sense to me. And I would take things literally, right? So like, I would read a passage like where Jesus talks about plucking your eye out. If your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. And I would literally take that seriously and be like, I know what he's trying to say. I know he's not actually saying, go and gouge your eye out. But actually, what if he is saying, go and gouge your eye out? Like, this is serious. This is really serious. Like, if my eye causes me to sin, and I'm like, how do I not sin? Like, I mean, like, what does that even mean? Like, at what level do I have to sin? Or, where do I get cut off? Where is the cutoff point? And, even at this point, I wouldn't say I was living a life of sin at all. By this point, I was well in the church vibes. I then met my second husband. I know, it's crazy. I'm going to be
in the church.
Soon. Yeah. Yeah. So I met him at the church. Well, no, actually, sorry. I met him at work. But the first thing, I used to talk to him. We were friends. So I used to talk to him about my faith. And he was really open. And I brought him to the church as when we were dating. Like when we just started kind of dating, because I wanted to test the waters, because I was like, I'm not making another mistake. There is absolutely no way I'm marrying someone that isn't in God's will. And I prayed and I asked for signs, and I put the fleece out, as they would say. And I was like, there is no way I'm making a mistake again. And everyone was like, well, just bring him, let us meet him, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, okay. So I brought him, and everyone loved him. And they were like, oh, he's amazing. He's a child of God. He's, he's really, he's a good one. He's a good egg. So, and literally within a couple of like days of him coming to the church, he professed Christ. He repented of his sins. He was on the floor. He said like he really felt overwhelmed with emotion. And he became a Christian, right? So then he started coming to the church with me, and we dated for a while. We got engaged, and then eventually we got married. So that was probably like 2 or 3 years. Love bombing. Yes, probably right. But at the time, again, I was none the wiser. I wasn't, I was looking for, all I cared about was doing it the way God wanted me to do it, right? And I really, my heart was genuinely pure. I can say that. Like I really, really did want to do the right thing. And I was like, I didn't do things in God's will before. This is going to change. This time I'm back. I'm in the fold. I'm his child. And actually, the way that I think what really made the difference for me this time was when I would hear the pastor preach, he would talk to you about why. Like, so rather than give you a list of rules, which is what I grew up with, or in my interpretation of it, I never really understood the whys. Why does God say not to do things? Why does God say that that's wrong? Why does God say that that's right? And I would be like, oh, okay, well, that makes a bit more sense now. Like, I understand now that why he wouldn't want me doing this. And, the obvious signs, like, why would you be out doing all of these things when, you could get hurt? Or, why are things sinful? Why do we call it sinful? And I didn't really understand why, but then as the pastor would unpack it, it made sense in my little head. I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense. So if I get married and we're in the church and, I'm living my life, I'm not living a life of sin, then I should be good, right? I should be good. So then we really served the church. We were like, I was in the worship band. The husband was, he would do all the sound. We'd go every Sunday. We would stack the chairs. We were always there. We were always the ones serving.
Can I ask, with your story, I just had a quick question. There's a verse, and there's probably a couple that could fit in this category, but there's a verse that says, the Lord will restore the years that the locusts have eaten. And there's this sense of like, God will put you through a trial, or he'll test your faith, or he'll do something kind of like the children of Israel in the wilderness. He'll let you go wander in the wilderness for a while, but eventually he will bring you home to the promised land. Did it feel like at that point that kind of all your heartaches and prayers were finally being answered by this? Is that like sort of like a reversal of the story?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And actually that's quite a poignant verse that you pointed out. The church was it was a Pentecostal church, and it was a branch of a much bigger entity. So they were called Church of God of Prophecy, but our little sort of church was kind of like a subsection of it. So there was a big one, and then we had like little plants around. So mine was like a small plant in North London.
So were they prophesying a lot with that name? Were they prophesying over you a lot?
Not at this point, actually. Okay. There wasn't, funnily enough, there wasn't a lot of sort of, I would say, sort of supernatural activity going on. It was quite tame for a Pentecostal church. The wider church was like that, but our little one wasn't really like that. I think if I'd seen that, people sort of, I had been to churches where I'd seen, like, when my parents would take me, where people are rolling around laughing and barking and doing all crazy stuff, and I'd be like, what the hell is going on?
I've heard a few people that talk about churches where someone's always coming up to you and saying, I have a word from the Lord for you. Like, God appeared to me last night and he told me you got to eat the chicken sandwich today. Like, I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, I would be so pissed off if people were constantly doing that, because you'd be thinking to yourself, why can't he just come directly to me and tell me? Like, if it's that important, just come tell me. And then, by the way, you said something this week, but someone else said something the week before, and they contradict each other. So which one of you is the one to listen to? I don't know. I'm kind of glad I didn't grow up in that. I suspect if I had grown up in that might have actually helped me deconstruct earlier, but mine was more vanilla, calm Christianity, you might say.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. And I think where the cracks started to show for me, so this denomination was an Arminianism doctrinal teaching. So I don't know whether again, like for the listeners, they believed you could lose your salvation. They believed that you were holy, set apart, but you could lose your salvation. So if you didn't comply, if you didn't tick the boxes, and they were very much about works. Never heard anything about grace ever at this church. It was all what you had to do. So as I started like becoming a little bit more aware, I think, of what was coming from the pulpit. Now, fast forward a few years, the sermon started to change shape. And I started to hear a lot of this negative kind of what you need to do to get right with God. And if you're not doing these things, you're at risk of being lost. You're at risk of Jesus spitting you out of his mouth. You're at risk of, separating the goat, the sheep from the goats and wheat from the chaff and all of that. And I would read these things and I would really, really believe that, is this me? I always felt like a disconnect. So say, for example, like people would be up praising, hands in the air, worshiping God. And I was the one that I'd be singing and I'd be standing there, but I could never connect. Like I always felt like, I don't know what it is I'm missing here. Is something misfiring in me? Like, why can't I connect with God? Like, why can't I feel his love? Why can't I feel his presence? Like everyone else can. Everyone else have got these amazing like gifts, and like my sister could speak in tongues, and I'm like, that's never happened to me. So you start to doubt yourself, and I'm like, is it my sin? Is it have I done something in my past? Have I not repented enough? Have I repented not hard enough? Have I started questioning so much about me. It turned me in on myself. So every little thing I was doing, whether it be going to work, talking to people, I was constantly like super vigilant of every little move that I made. And I couldn't trust myself. Like, I think I just had no security in myself. It was all built up in this being who was meant to be there for me. One hand I'm being told he loves me unconditionally, then the next minute I'm being told, well, no, he don't, because actually if you do one thing wrong, or if you don't tick all the boxes, you don't meet his standards, you're lost.
Yep.
Now that fear really, really took hold of me. And before I knew it, I was having panic attacks. At the time, I didn't know this was what was happening to me, but I would go in to church and I'd sit down and my body would shake. I'd convulse, like I would be like that. And I was so afraid of what was going to come out of the guy's mouth, the pastor's mouth that week, that it would really affect me, really, really affect me. And I was really genuinely, really, really frightened at this point. Now, at this season of the church, they started to introduce like, they started talking about the world, and they started introducing things like videos, like from YouTube. Like this is when like YouTube just kind of started making its appearance, and they started looking at things like the Illuminati and looking into like famous people that are part of this are Satanists, and they would show videos of, which is like, why are you doing this in a church? Like, I don't know. But, because it was a young vibe, everyone was like, oh, have you seen this? You've got to see this. This person done this symbol and it means that. And they're part of this big new world order. And, this is all this negative stuff's going to happen. And the world to me just seemed like the darkest place, right? The darkest place. You couldn't go anywhere. Everything was evil. Satan was everywhere. He was after me. He was after my soul. My mum used to say that to me. He's coming after your soul. And I'm sitting here thinking,
that's crazy.
Okay, this is kind of petrifying, because you're telling me all these things, but yet I'm not feeling like I'm connected to God. If anything, I'm feeling like quite insecure as to like where I stand. I don't know where I stand with him. Like I'm like, I'm trying to connect. I'm reading the Bible and I'm saying to people, I'm saying to the pastor, like, how do you hear his voice? How do I connect with him? Like, how can I know him? How can I know him more? Oh, you've just got to, he's everywhere, Chrissy. You just got to read the Bible. You just got to pray more. So I'm like, every night I am praying. Every day I'm looking in scripture. I'm reading stuff, but then the things I'm reading are pretty terrifying. I'm reading about genocide. I'm reading about rape. I'm reading about slavery. I'm reading about all these things that I'm like, hold on, this isn't making sense. I can't, I'm starting to rationalize now. My logical side of my brain is kicking in saying, hang on, what, you've never been taught any of this. You've never been taught any of this. And I'm like I'm saying to the pastor, hang on a minute, you know, why did God do this? Why did God do that? In fact, when Jesus went around healing people, why did he only heal one person? Right? Like that, to me, I know it sounds crazy. Maybe people have never really thought of it, but I always used to think, hang on, if I had the power to heal people, why am I only picking one person to heal? I have hundreds of lepers, broken people everywhere, and I'm healing one person. I'm like, where's the love? Like, what? How is that loving? And I couldn't compute. I was like, what? Am I missing something here? Like, am I actually missing something here? And then I started to talk about my concerns to the pastor. I'd be like, I don't really understand. Like, I don't see love here. I'm not seeing it in your teachings. I'm not computing with what you're saying. And he would be like, well, you just need to listen to me, Chrissy, because, you know, if you don't, you're at risk of, you know, being lost.
Yeah.
You've got to listen. Like, what? You just stick with me, stick with what I'm saying and what I'm teaching you, and you'll be fine. That was his answer, right?
So basically, check your brain at the door.
Yeah, basically. So I don't know at what point that started to happen, but over a period of maybe a couple of months, I started to have intrusive thoughts. And I've never experienced anything like it. My mind, I feel like the only way I can explain it is like someone got my mind and went like this to it and pulled it and pulled it and pulled it. That's the only way I could describe the pain that I had, the mental anguish that I started to get. So the intrusive thoughts were all about your worst fears, right? What's to stop you from doing this? What's to stop you from doing that? What's to stop you from veering your car off the road? What's to stop you from jumping in front of a train? What's to stop me from hurting someone? What's to stop me from doing this? I became a wreck, a mental wreck. I couldn't go near knives. I was petrified. I couldn't go near kids, near anyone. I was going to work like a zombie. And I could barely I don't even know how I did my job, to be honest. I don't know how I did it. I was like, I just became a shell of who I was, because every day I was barely sleeping. My brain broke. That's the only way I can explain it. I mean, I've looked into it now, like, years later, where we've got the facilities to look into it. But, you're talking like 15 years ago, right? So there wasn't like what we have now, where we can make sense of things and, you get answers. At the time, I just thought I was under attack.
Yeah. Did anyone know about this, or was it just you and your private
It was me
thoughts?
at first. Then I told my mum. I remember calling my mum and saying, Mum, I'm really afraid. I'm having all kinds of thoughts. I can't stop my mind. I'm scared I might do something to myself, to someone. I don't know what, and my mum was just like, look, it's just a trial. God's just testing you. You're going to come through the other side. He's going to use you for his glory. It's just a trial. We've all gone through it. And my mum had gone through something like when she was younger, something kind of similar. Not the same, but like a mental health issue. So she was like, this is what it's about. It's preparing you for something big. And I'm like, this is horrific, like honestly horrific. And I went and spoke to my pastor, and I'd gone to work the day the day before, I'd gone to work and I was standing at the tube at the platform. And one thing I would say, when your brain is under such immense stress and trauma, you feel things, or you think you feel things, you think you see things, and you think you sense things. So I was standing at the train platform waiting for the tube, and I felt like someone pushed me. In my mind, I felt like I had been pushed, like as in to try, like, you know, to what's to stop you from jumping in front of the tube, right? So I was petrified, because I was like, what the hell's going on? The devil's trying to kill me. He's after me. And I was a mess. I was a complete mess. So I went to the pastor and I said, look, I'm really scared. This is what's happening to me. And he turned around and he said to me, oh, the devil's really after you, isn't he? I was like, mate, what? The devil's really after you. I'm telling you that I'm absolutely petrified of what's happening to me right now. And that's all you have for me, is the devil's after me. You don't already think that I think that? Like, how is that helpful? How is that? I was just like, I was dumbfounded, really. So he was like, go on, sorry.
Did he have any sense that, like, that God is more powerful and he's going to protect you? Or was it just like...
Nope. Not at that point. But what he did suggest was, let's get the church round to pray for you. So I was like, oh, okay. So now I have to tell people, like, that I'm not quite well. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I'm not very well. And I didn't want to tell everyone what was happening to me, because it was massively private. I didn't even tell my husband. I was like, he knew something was going on, but I didn't tell him what was going on. I was too embarrassed. I was so ashamed of the thoughts I was having. And then I started to kind of disassociate. Like, I hated my body. I hated, like, you know, being female. I was afraid that, oh, what if you know, want to become a man? Or it was just crazy, really wacky fears, but all fears that had been taught to me throughout my life, right? The things that are evil, the things that are bad that people do or become, they are all the things that I started to think was going to happen to me. And I couldn't understand why I was praying to God to help me, to deliver me, to save me. I thought I was possessed. I was convinced I was possessed. And I was like, I feel like he's pushing me away. Like, no, go, you know, I don't want to know you. I don't want to know you. You're evil. You're bad. You're sinful. So that just added to my stress. So the whole church came round to the house. And I remember they put me in the middle, and I felt really uncomfortable. I was just like, this is weird, you know.
Like laying hands on you kind of stuff?
Sorry?
Like laying hands on you kind of stuff?
Yeah. And they all prayed for me. Bless them, you know, their intentions were, there was nothing wrong with what they were doing. They thought they were doing the right thing. But for me, I felt very vulnerable, very exposed. Especially because I couldn't make sense of why it was happening to me. I just felt like I'd been selected from all these people to have this awful thing, this awful trial happen to me, you know. And like, I've got my mum trying to give me the positive spin on it, to say, you know, you're going through something, but, you know, God's going to use you, and you're going to be able to see things, and you're going to know things that other people don't know, and you'll have blessings once you're through the other side, which was the only kind of positive thing I could take from it. And then I had everyone else on the other side trying to sort of understand, oh, you know, but why are you going through, like, why is this happening to you and not us, kind of thing? And I'm like, well, I don't know, like, I don't know why this is happening to me, but I think it's because I believe everything I'm reading. Every bit of scripture I'm reading, I fully take to heart. Like, I'm really believing this stuff, you know? And I'm scared. I'm scared that I won't make it. I'm scared that I'm not enough. I'm not good enough for God. I'm not what he wants. I'm scared that he will spit me out his mouth, you know, and I could not. I mean, it sounds like I'm talking like, and it sounds really crazy, but it was genuinely how I felt. I was genuinely. I wrote a diary actually when I was going through it. I don't even know how, because I've never written a diary since, and I'm not a diary person. So at the time, I wrote a diary of what I was experiencing, and it's like Pandora's box. I'm afraid to open it because I was so raw. Every emotion I was feeling was so raw and out there and so different that you know, if anyone ever found that, they'd be like, "Whoa, hang on, she's going a bit psycho here." You know, but I think genuinely, I mean, for me, like now I know it was psychosis. At the time, I thought I was a bit, I was like, am I schizophrenic? And I'm like, but no, I'm not really hearing like loads of different voices. It's my own voice that I can hear. It's my own, well, at the time it was my own voice I could hear, but it was like constant bombardment of thought upon thought upon thought, and my mind just wouldn't shut up. So I was like, I feel like I'm going mad, and I don't know who to turn to. I was too scared to tell anyone because I didn't want to go to the doctors, or didn't want to go to a hospital. I didn't want to get locked up. So then I found a friend who was also from a Pentecostal black background, but far more than me. She was like fully in it, big Pentecostal church. Mum was like a prayer warrior, you know, a very, very like big into like the supernatural. And I remember just confiding in her, because I think we just gelled over something. She said something that made me think I could tell her. So I told her. She said to me, "Chrissy, that's happened to me." And I was like, "What?" And she was like, "Yeah, the same thing. What you're saying has happened to me." So I was like, "Has this happened to you? And has that happened to you?" And the fact that just someone had a similar experience was like, I can't even tell you how comforting that was in the moment of just knowing that, okay, maybe this is a thing then. Maybe God is testing me for a reason. Maybe, you know, it makes sense, right? It makes sense. And she was like, honestly, my saving grace during that period, because I still couldn't talk to anyone other than my mum and her. And she was really the only one that kind of knew the depth of what was happening. Because every time I'd get a new thought, every time I got a new fear, I had fears of all kinds of things. So I would watch TV. This is how mad my mind went. I would watch TV and I couldn't differentiate between what was real and what wasn't. I couldn't do it. I'd be like sat there like a zombie, like, is this real or is this not real?
With your intrusive thoughts, did you feel like you were in danger of becoming actually suicidal?
No, because I didn't feel suicidal, like I wanted to die, or wanted those fear that had those thoughts. But it was more about what was pushing me to challenge it, like what's to stop you from veering your car into that van, into that lorry. So that, not that I wanted that, it was more about, I think, the insecurity of not feeling protected, not feeling secure in myself. Those deep-rooted fears were pushing me to, because I couldn't understand where his protection was. If I've got a God that's meant to love me, that is meant to be there for me, okay, I get the whole I'm a sinner piece, right? But we've gone past that. I get that. You know, you've accepted him as your Lord and Savior. But then what do I get as a result of this relationship? Like, surely if I've done that piece, then I should have someone that's in my corner, that's protecting me, that has a plan for my life. Apparently Jeremiah says he knows the plans for my life, right? So trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. That was me always. I'm trusting God. I don't know what's going to happen here, but I'm trusting him. And I'm like, but I've got nothing to hang my hat on. Like, at a deep level, I've got no security. I don't know if I'm safe with this God. I don't know if he's there. I don't know if he's going to protect me. I don't know if he's going to be there for me. I don't know. And I never felt that certainty. So as the fears grew and grew and grew, I become worse and worse and worse in terms of my mental health. So I spent, go on, sorry.
It's amazing what that mentality does to when you get into both the arenas that you talked about of like the fear of Satan's chasing you,
Yeah,
and the fear of losing your salvation, and just maybe the micro issues like the angels and demons fighting.
yeah,
It gets to a point like you're saying where it's really scary. I mean, it's almost like a lot of the scary movies I think that we watch, some of them are so weird. It's like, well, that's entertainment, but it kind of stays at that level. But every once in a while, you come across a scary movie where it's like it literally gives you goosebumps, or you call them goose pimples over there.
yeah,
It gives you goose pimples. You're like, that's a little bit too close to home. Like that actually freaks me out to watch.
yeah.
I've only had that experience 2 or 3 times with horror movies, but I tend to stay away from them because you never know when you're going to get one. But like I remember when I was at the church I grew up in for many years as a teenager, I was getting into Frank Peretti's books. Do you know that name?
Yes.
This Present Darkness. And like,
Yes.
and it was like this. I was totally reading about it, and I was really thinking that that's the key to the spiritual life, is to understand that your part in like reading the Bible and confessing sin is basically helping the angels to do their part to fight the demons that are probably right above your head.
Yeah.
But I remember this one night we were out at all youth group, and like you could, as we were leaving the youth group, we were like we could see a bunch of adults like whispering like something horrible had happened. It's like, oh God, what is this? Like everyone's usually like happy and leaving, and this young couple, the husband had been coming home late from work, and he was very, very smart, very, very, mature, good guy. And I think they had a small kid, but he was at a railroad crossing, and he was the kind of guy that you would never think he would like try to race, beat the train at the last second. But somehow something happened. Either he did, or just some mistake of judgment, and he got just absolutely killed by this train.
Oh.
And it was at the time that I was thinking of these angels and demons, and I thought, oh my God, like this is not the kind of guy that would have done that. Those demons probably got him. And it's amazing where the mind goes with this stuff once you really, really believe it.
Yeah, 100%. And I got to the point where I remember one night I used to read like there's a book my mum gave me called Streams in the Desert. I don't know if anyone's ever read that.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know it?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. And our daily bread.
Our daily bread, yeah. So I used to read that every night. And that was like, obviously, it's full of people that have gone through trials, right? And I actually found like quite a few references to similarities to things that I was going through. So I'm like, oh, some of these people are experiencing what I'm experiencing, which, I mean, now when you think about it, like these people were Christians and they were writing about the trials that they were going through, and I'm like, well, maybe there's a common denominator here. It's there's something we shouldn't overlook, the fact that we've all got these kind of mental health issues because of this one thing, right? So, but obviously, when I was going through it, I was reading it, I was highlighting things, and it gave me hope, right? It gave me hope that there was purpose, that there was an end. But I remember one night reading something, and I shut my eyes and I heard a voice. And this is one of the things that really took me a long time to deconstruct from, right? And I heard a voice, and I'll never forget the words. And the words were, this is what the devil does to people. Trust me, obey me. Now, I had that. It was like, I remember explaining it to my mum. It was like a long distance phone call. And it was a male voice. And I heard it, and I was very much like, I kind of sat up and was like, what was that? What was that? Was that God? Was that Jesus? What, but it didn't bring me any comfort, right? If you think about the words, right? This is what the devil does to people. Trust me, obey me. How, in the mess that I was in the absolute horror that was my life, why on earth would they be the words of comfort from an all-powerful God that loves and cares for you as his daughter, as his child? What kind of comforting words are they?
Like he's threatening you.
Yeah. And I'm like, I mean, now I'm looking back, I'm like, again, I think that was just part of the psychosis that I went through. I think, when I've done the research and I've looked into things, and like, obviously when you're under extreme trauma, you can hallucinate, you can hear things, blah, blah, blah. So the only thing I can possibly put it down to is the fact that it was part of my trauma experience. And those words, I think I was so desperate to hear from God. I was so desperate for something from him to give me some comfort, to tell me it's going to be okay, like you're going to get through this, or an explanation as to why I was going through it, or just acceptance that I was his. There was that desire was so overwhelmingly strong that I think my brain must have just conjured up something from somewhere and probably like referenced some of the stuff I was reading. I don't know. I don't fully really understand how it works, but it happened. So that took a long time for me, even after I was kind of deconverting, to that was kind of like the last thing, because I was like, but I've had an experience. I really was convinced I'd heard God's voice. And now I'm just like, no, I don't think it was. I mean, I know I heard something, certainly that's not a lie, but I just don't think it was God now. I just think it was my brain. Right. I'd lost the plot in that, in that moment.
Well, it's a testament that when you think about this stuff the way you're doing it, your brain makes it real. I mean, it really does. And I mean, I remember, this is a little bit of a different kind of example, not really related, but when I grew up, I had severe insomnia my whole life.
Okay.
And I eventually moved from Pennsylvania to Georgia for a special doctor. But in those years while I was dealing with the intensity of it, I was going through the normal route, which is you take a lot of different medicines. They just kind of try different ones. And I distinctly remember there was one medicine that I took, and I literally saw pirates around the bed. And I knew in my head, and I was wide awake. It wasn't like I was dreaming. Like, I was wide awake and I saw pirates around the bed. And I knew they weren't there. And so it wasn't like a threat, but it's just like, it's like crazy what your mind can do. And even though you weren't doing it obviously through medicines, it's like your brain makes stuff so real, and it's crazy. But I mean, on the spiritual level, like, there's nothing that says that, hey, this is medicine, there's a good explanation for this. Like, you actually believe that this is really, really God or the devil. And the one thing I was just going to add a while ago, I'll just put it in here. When I was growing up, I didn't have experiences like you, but I do know that just philosophically, we used to pray for things not quite like that, but in that direction, for them to happen to us. And I know it's like, why would we pray for that? The reason was, they used to say, you want to be so busy at the Lord's work that you get on Satan's radar. They used to say, if you're not on Satan's radar, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
If your feet get out of bed in the morning and hit the floor and the devils don't kind of shake and be like, oh shit, he's awake again. Yeah. You're doing it wrong. You got to make waves. Are you a warrior or you're not? And it's crazy. And again, my version of Christianity did not take me your direction. I think I would have been freaked out if it had. But philosophically, we wanted the devil to be afraid of us. So it's interesting how that all works. But anyway,
and I remember actually going when I went to service on a Sunday after they'd all prayed for me, and this guy came up to me and he was like, you're a warrior, the Lord's going to use you, you're going to like trample over Satan's kingdom. And I was just like, yeah, I hope so. I'm like, I literally got no strength left in me, but yeah, I'll try, mate. So I was, that was kind of like, that was the vibe. Like, people were like, yeah, you're going through this for a purpose. We're warriors for the kingdom. And, and I really believe that, right? I really believe that. Although that I was torn, as in like, well, 1 minute I'm feeling like God's just given me over to Satan. That was the other thing. That was the other scripture, when it talks about giving you over to Satan. Not that I was like, well, I haven't done anything. Like, why would God give me over to Satan? Like, it's not like I'm in some terrible, like, horrible, sinful relationship and, God's given me over. But then that's how it felt. I felt like he'd given me over to Satan. And I was just like, why would he do that to me? Why, you're taking scripture. And this is the problem with taking things and like what applies to you and what doesn't, right? Because then you've got all of God's promises that people would always read, and I'm like, but how do you know that I mean, you know, that first of all, that was written at a time for particular people in a particular time. Why are you applying it to you today? Like, where does it say to apply it to you? You know, and like, how do you know what to pick? That what applies to you and what doesn't apply to you, and like you know, I'll be like, well, I don't know, but you know, in this one, it's telling me that this is the things that could happen if you know, if you don't do the right things, or like even if you do, I mean, you know, like I say, I didn't think I was doing anything. I was questioning. I was always looking inwardly, so I was always like looking at myself, like self-condemning, always condemning myself. Did I say something? Did I have a bad thought? Did I do this? Did I do that? I was always analyzing myself, and I was full of shame, even though I had nothing to really be ashamed about. I was full of shame, because I was always like, he doesn't, I'm not enough. Like, there must be a reason for this. So anyway, so this carried on for quite a while. And during that period of me becoming ill, my husband lost his job, so he was made redundant, and actually he didn't work for a number of years, which put the pressure on me even more. So not only was I trying to sustain myself from going mad, I was also trying to sustain us financially. At the time, that his dad also become very sick. His dad had cancer. And this is the first experience I'd had with someone that I loved that was gonna die, right? And I had all this going on, all these fears, and this man, my father-in-law, he converted to Christianity, right? And so everyone was fine, because all right, not fine, but you know, okay, we know he's gonna pass. Like, we knew that he's terminal, but you know, he's given his life to Christ, so you know, that it makes it that little bit better, because we know he's going to heaven, right? Never mind the fact that he suffered horrendously, right? And I remember going to the hospital to see him, and I took one look at him and I passed out straight on the floor. I passed out. The what I saw in terms of the reality of someone being very unwell, the cancer had spread to his brain, and he was like a vegetable, right? He was awake, but he wasn't there. And I've got like people around him praying for him, talking, you know, scripture. And I came to, and I'm just looking at him going, what the hell is happening here? How is this suffering okay? How am I seeing this man who I love, he's suffering, and it's gone to his brain? Like, is he aware of what's happening? Is he not aware? How much pain is he in? And I watched him die. I watched him take his last breath. And that fucked me up for a long time, because I couldn't rationalize, where is God in this? The peace that passes all understanding, I had none. I was a wreck. I could not fathom how his death, his decline, and then his death was in God's will. Well, not that it wasn't. I know people pass, right? But where was God in this? Why didn't he save him? Why didn't he cure him? Why didn't he make his death less painful? You know, he given his life to him. Why did we have to witness that? You know, so that was a massive turning point for me, I think, because the fear that I saw, the death, I really stared death in the face. That was a big turning point for me. And then things got worse. So after he passed, my mum then became quite ill, and my mum suffered
Oh,
with really, really, really terrible depression. Now
mm,
we kind of think, like, now years later, my mum's passed away now 9 years, but when she went through it, we didn't have a name for it, right? Because we had her assessed by psychiatrists, Christian psychiatrists nonetheless. And we took her to doctors, and doctors just put it down to depression. But now looking back, we think she may have had bipolar. She may have even had some dementia. We don't really know. She's only 69. She wasn't really, and she was a fit 69. She was a well 69. But my mum went from someone who was full of life, full of joy, always like out there, really looked after herself, to someone that was like hugely, hugely depressed. And
wow.
the impact it had on my dad, on me, she was really, and I was still not in a good place mentally. And I'm watching my mum now bashing her head against the wall, saying, I can't, want to die, I want to die, I want to die. And I'm like, sorry, where's God here? Well, this is a woman who has served him faithfully for years, and I'm like watching her decline every single day. Didn't talk, didn't want to see anyone, didn't want to talk to anyone, would scream, would lie in bed for days, it was just horrible. It was just absolutely awful watching this. And my mum's praying, and where is God? Look at, where is he? Where is he? I don't understand. And I'm like sitting there thinking, God, this is the woman that's propped me up for years, and now the shoe's on the other foot almost, and she doesn't know where her God is, and I don't know where her God is. And I'm like, what is going on? I just, again, couldn't really make sense of it. We tried everything. We
Mm,
had people, pastors, come in and pour oil all over her head to anoint her with oil. We had every Tom, Dick, and Harry come and counsel my mum and dad and pray for them, and she got no better. In fact, she got worse. And then she ended up going into hospital, and she had a perforated bowel, which then led it to burst, and then she ended up getting sepsis. And lo and behold, she passed away. So I got a phone call to go to the hospital 1 o'clock in the morning. Your mum's not responding to medication. You need to come to the hospital. I didn't know that it meant she wasn't going to make it. I just thought, okay, well, I was like, well, why can't you give us something else then? And they were like, well, we suggest you come in. So I was like, so I booted it down to the hospital. And as I got there, like my family, then my mum's brother was there, and he came straight over to me and like put me in his arms. And I was like, whoa, what are you doing? And he's like, he just shook his head, and then I just lost the plot. So then after that, I went and saw my mum, and my mum lying there again, and I'm just looking at her, and I'm trying to comprehend the soul. Is there a soul? Is there no soul? What have I just experienced? This is my mum, 69 years old, within literally going into hospital within a few days, gone. Never thought in a million years that this was going to happen, but she wanted to die. They were her words. I want to die. And I'm like, again, how can we say suffering is part of God's plan? How can we say divine hiddenness is part of his plan? Oh, but some people die, some people don't. It's part of life. We live in a sinful world. Like, I know every single counter argument there is. I know it all. I've heard it all. I was the one that used to say those counter arguments to others that would give it to me. But now I'm on the flip side, and I'm like, actually, no. There is no words to see someone suffer, decline, and then die like that. with no comfort, nothing from a higher, from a God that is meant to be there for you, care for you. I'm not saying people don't pass away. Obviously, it's a part of life, right? But why do we have to suffer like that? Why does anyone have to suffer like that? And that really, I think, was the beginning part of me trying to figure out as well, like how to try and make sense of this. Because it's one thing to actually have a belief system, but actually when real life hits, you need to do something with those beliefs. Those beliefs then start to come into question, and you're like, hang on a minute, how am I going to make sense of this? So by then, my mental health was just, my fear was just on a crazy scale. Like I wasn't sleeping. I was really unwell. I was having panic attacks all the time.
I was gonna say your story at this point is just like you've been under fire for at that point for what, like a decade or so at that point. It sounds like. I mean, that's just insane. And even if suddenly everything calmed down, like that's enough to traumatize you for the rest of your life. I mean, that's just so much. I was just gonna add what the thing about, suffering. Why does God allow suffering? I think the thing that also kicks it into high gear for a lot of us is realizing that the suffering that's happening to children, and so much of it is needless, or that God could intervene, where you're looking at, maybe if you're looking at children who are dying of starvation, like why can't God give them food? Why, like there's plenty of time that God could have figured out, especially with modern technology, how to get all children food. And the children being assaulted and wounded and hurt, but in different ways. Like God's just going to sit back and watch these kids getting assaulted and not do something. And just eventually, between general suffering and seeing childhood suffering, or at least knowing that it's happening, I guess not seeing it necessarily, but knowing it's happening out there, it's just enough to break your heart. And you think, God, where in the hell are you? And I think it was a big motif in my deconstruction timeframes to hear over and over and over atheists and agnostics saying stuff like, if I were God, I'd do a better job than God does because I would intervene. And it just, when you're a Christian trying to defend it, you have your excuses, but eventually you're like, we're better than God. We're on a lot of levels, but at least these, where we would not let children die of starvation. We would not let children be assaulted all the time. And I do want to say just too, I'm sorry for all the pain you've gone through. I know we're probably not done all the hard parts of your story, but I'm just really sorry that you went through all that. And especially knowing that you had to go through a lot of that by yourself and just carry the burden inside, and just sort of between you and God, especially now knowing that God wasn't there. It really was just you and you. And no one else was helping you. And that's a lot. And it was a lot.
No, thank you for that. And you know what, it was a lot. To have like so much happen in such a short space of time. And then, the cherry on the cake was my husband had an affair, and that was like the cherry. You can't make this shit up, honestly. You literally can't. But he then I found that he was having an affair, and the marriage just, to be honest, the marriage was kind of done anyway, because we were so sorry, I should go back a little bit. We addressed some of the concerns that we were seeing doctrinal wise with the pastor. Because we were like, look, you talk about hell all the time. You're talking about all of this. You're scare tacting. You're fear mongering people. What about these verses? Like the counter, like the positive verses, like the counter argument, the Calvinist side of things, which I didn't know was a thing by then, but I only knew of this one doctrine. But obviously we were like finding scripture, and my dad was coming to the church now, and he was like saying, hang on a minute. He's taking that verse out of context. Why is he saying this? Why is he saying that? So when we wrote him a letter, and in the letter we explained how we were feeling, and he got up and basically called us wolves and said, there's wolves here, blah blah blah. Anyway, so we ended up leaving the church, and to be honest, I got a lot of backlash for it. Everyone, all the friends that we had, were calling me. They couldn't understand why we'd left. They were like, we don't get it. Like, you're all right, you're going through all of this stuff, but you know, why hasn't it happened to us then? Why aren't we unwell? What if, you know, if we are hearing the same teaching, why hasn't it affected us? And I'm like, I don't know. But now I know. I'm like, I think the reason why is because you don't take it seriously, or you think you're ticking all the boxes. Because the other thing that can happen is when you're getting a lot of this kind of negative, like, you need to watch yourself, like, you need to do all these things, this tick list, you're like, I'm nailing it. I haven't done this. I haven't done that. Da, 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 da. Then you become self-righteous because you're like, yeah, well, you know, and then you start looking down on people because, hey, you got it all nailed. You're not doing this. You know, you're not gossiping. You're not sinning. You're you're in a good place, and you and God are like tight. So like, I don't, you start looking down on everyone. So I think, like, my view is people that don't really read the Bible, really take it seriously for what it says, then of course you're going to be thinking that you're fine, like you're safe. I'm saved. God loves me. He's, you know, everything is good. Everything's tickety-boo. I'm going to heaven. But actually, you know, if you really evaluate what he says, if you really evaluate Jesus's teachings, you're going to fall really short. But then you have the other people that are like, yeah, but his grace is sufficient. His grace is sufficient. It's all about grace. It's all about grace. So that's kind of what brought me out of the depression I was in. So, or not really the depression, but the funk I was in. So move on to, I eventually, like I say, I found out about the husband doing that. We divorced. So again, another massive load of grief that I had to process while also dealing with my mum's death. So I got introduced to someone called Matt Chandler. Do you know him? From the Village Church?
The Deconstruction is sexy guy.
Yeah. Yes, that's the one. Yeah. I forgot you said that. You just reminded me. So yeah, I got introduced to him, right? And at first, he was a breath of fresh air because obviously Calvinist, talked about all the things that I was being taught that were negative, you know, like, oh, there was one thing I remember him saying, and my parents used to say this to me: when you die, or when it's judgment day, like, there's going to be a huge screen, and like all of your life is going to be on show. Like, everyone's going to see everything you've ever done. I don't know whether you ever got told this, but yeah, everyone's going to see everything you've ever done, and then God's going to separate all the bad people from the good people, and da 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 da. So, you know, I really believed this was a thing, right? So one of the things I remember, like, one of the things Matt Chandler first said was like, oh, I bet you were told this and this and this, you know, and that's not in the Bible. That's not biblical. And I remember that. What do you mean it's not in the Bible? Like, huh? What? I'm sure it is. I mean, I literally grew up with this since I was like from the womb. Yeah. You're telling me it's not in the Bible. And he was like, you know, no, it's not in the Bible. Anyhow, so there was loads of stuff that he then begun to unpick for me that I'd been taught. And obviously with a different doctrine, with a Calvinistic doctrine where once saved, always saved, you're predestined, all the security I was longing for, this was what I needed. So I was like, oh, okay, oh my God, all this time, it's been wrong. Everything points to Jesus. And everything was like, everything, you know, where he talks about, you know, if you sinned, cut off your hand. If, you know, go, everything is pointing to Christ, because you can't do it. Because you're so depraved, you can't do it. So therefore, the grace that Jesus shows you on the cross is what is enough to basically save you. You don't need to do anything. Okay. So that for me was like, okay, if that's true, and I've been reading scripture wrong, which is, again, who's got the right interpretation? Please, can we someone just call it out? 45,000 denominations so far, I think people are counting. What? Right? So I'm like, okay, so I've been reading it wrong, or the pastor's been teaching me wrong, my parents have been teaching me wrong. This is the right way to view it. So I'm like, well, that makes sense, because that's bringing me comfort as opposed to destroying me. It's actually building me up. So as I started listening to it, I was like, oh, you know, this makes sense. I started feeling more free, a little bit more liberated. The chains started falling off. I felt like I was starting to heal. So I would lap up all of every single sermon he would preach. I would be lapping it up. And the good things that I was taking from it was obviously all of the he was deconstructing all of the negative stuff that I'd been taught. So I did that for about 2 years, right? And I listened to a few other Calvinistic teachers as well, like Steve Brown, and then there was a guy called Tullian Tavidian for a little while. And there was quite a few American. They're always American. never anyone British.
Did you come across Andy Stanley at all?
No, that's not a name I heard of. No.
Yeah, I'm just curious. He's probably in a similar ballpark. But yeah, a lot of them did turn not as much to like a prosperity gospel where it's like really appealing, but definitely a more grace-centered teaching where you're really looking at it and saying, if your experience of God is not just that he is the most loving father in the universe who just cares for you and adores you and wants the best for you, if your theology isn't leading you there, you're definitely doing it wrong. And I definitely got that sense more and more. I did not grow up in that, but I got that sense of a lot of pastors were moving that direction. I think it was in many ways like the pendulum swing where they were used to the old version where it's like fire and brimstone pounding the pulpit, and then their own children become pastors and they're like, we're not doing it the way our dad did it. We're going to be more loving. And it's fascinating how it goes back and forth like that. But did you feel though, like at that point with Matt Chandler and these other guys you mentioned, that you were getting to a point of maybe saying, what, I'm not questioning the faith anymore. I'm pretty sure that we're back to where we should be. Like, did you feel like you were in a safe zone, or did you feel like you were still on a tightrope wire with deconstruction?
No, I felt like at that point I was in a safe zone. So I started to feel more like, it was almost like the building blocks. He was building like the foundation blocks again for me, like starting from scratch, but with a different lens. Rather than the lens I had at the time, obviously, which was super, super like negative. What he was doing was rebuilding my confidence in a different way, and I started to feel more secure. So,
but up to that point, you would never up to that point said to yourself, maybe this God is not real. That had not crossed your mind yet.
Really, no, okay. Not at this point. No, I didn't understand his ways. Like I say, I questioned everything, and I was really like, but I would just put it down to the fact that, we can't question God. Like, things happen. We're in a sinful world. The world's not as it's meant to be. In one day in heaven, we'll wipe away every tear. All the classic stuff that we tell ourselves to make ourselves feel better, right? But, that's kind of what I had to comfort myself, because I had nothing else. I had no other framework to make sense of everything that had happened. So I had to kind of roll with something. So that's kind of what I chose. So obviously with all this new teaching, and obviously I wasn't going to the church anymore. I was just literally listening to these sermons. I was finding peace. I was finding comfort. So I was like, okay, great. And then like that lasted for probably a couple of years, right? And then I started to think to myself, as I got that like new teaching, obviously you're predestined, chosen by God. That then became a problem, because now I'm looking at people around me going, hang on a minute, how do I know if like that person's gone, like my family, people that I love, like my friends, people that mean so much to me, even if I, teach them and preach them and give them the gospel, and if God doesn't choose them, they ain't getting saved.
Yep.
And then I'm like thinking of them burning in hell and being tortured. And that destroyed me. That literally felt like a dagger going into my heart, because by now I've become a really massive empath, and I still am, right? Because of everything that I'd gone through, like I was really sensitive to pain and really sensitive to suffering. And I still am now, years later, that obviously I've come out the other side, but I still am a huge empath. And thinking of people suffering forever because God didn't choose them and they weren't elect, and we don't know really who is and who isn't, right? that for me, I just was like, oh, hang on a minute, what? So then, as I mentioned to you before, like my sister and her husband had gone to America, and her husband had joined John MacArthur Seminary. So they'd done the seminary and they come back to England for a holiday with this whole new teaching, right? They had this teaching from John MacArthur. And I remember feeling like my sister was like in a set of Stepford Wives. I mean, it was really bizarre. Like her behavior, like, was strange. And they had like loads of teaching from Paul Washer. I don't know if you know Paul Washer.
Yeah,
So
very
they
much
come
so.
back and they were like, you got to listen to this. This is amazing teaching. Paul Washer, John MacArthur. Listen to this sermon. So I'm thinking it's kind of going to be like Matt Chandler. And I'm listening to it and I'm like, whoa, Paul Washer. You know, I know some people like him, but whatever sermon I listened to, man, it was like he put me back like 3 years. You know, he put me back 3 years. It was such a damning sermon. And I found John MacArthur the same.
Yeah, for sure.
And I was like, I can't understand how you're okay with this. And I remember saying to my sister, like, how are you okay with just, and she was like, well, you're a sinner. You know, we are, we're wretched sinners. You know, we don't deserve God's grace. You know, like we don't deserve anything. You know, like you basically, you're lucky you're getting saved. Like you're lucky that he's chosen you. You're lucky. You know, you're privileged. You know, you don't deserve it. You're dirty rags. Your righteousness is filthy rags to God. Like your best day is filthy to God. And I'm like, well, hang on, I've just spent like however long trying to get to a place of like being able to breathe again, and now you've come like with this whirlwind of a whole new like negative doctrine teaching. And I was just like, this, who is right? Why are there so many like people reading one book and having different versions of it, or having different interpretations or different understanding of what the text says? Like, who are we believing here? Why
and they're all sure they're right.
Yeah,
they're all dead sure they're right.
Yeah. And you know, I said to her, hang on a minute, so hang on, they don't believe in the gifts of the Spirit, right? They're
Right.
sensationalists, they don't believe in it. So what are you doing with your tongues, girl? And she's like, well, you know, we don't agree with that. I was like, oh, but you don't agree with that. But you can agree with everything else that he's saying, but you don't agree because you know that you speak in tongues, and he's against that. And actually, he'd say that you're from the devil. Did you know that? You know, and she was like, there would be excuses. You'd have to do so much mental gymnastics to try and make it fit your narrative. Try to make it fit your narrative, and it just doesn't fit. So you're like,
with the Calvinism too. I got into that myself. That was my end of my journey. And one of the things that shocked me, which is exactly what you're talking about, is the idea that there's so many interpretations. I did not know, but there's a whole massive enclave of Calvinists that believe in baptizing babies. And I grew up like in a very Baptist environment where you know, baptism is for people who can profess their faith.
Yeah.
This is believers' baptism. And I was like, what in the world? So like Calvinism made so much sense to me logically. Like, but there is a massive proportion that now baptize their babies, and it just like blows your mind. And I mean, the list of those, this just goes on and on. But what at this point, did you? I asked this before about your other parts of your story, but did you have anyone you could really go to that you could trust and just say, not like your sister where they were already firm in their path, but just someone who would just listen and say, I'm not going to judge you, but yeah, let's talk through this.
Yeah,
or we're against solo again.
My cousin, actually, my cousin Chris, who he's still a Christian to this day, although I'm trying to show him a different way. But he's a very kind of like, it's really bizarre to me because he's so smart. He's like genius smart. But he was the one that was like, it's all about Jesus. Like, just put your trust in Jesus. Trust Jesus. You know, everything points to him. Everything is about him. It's not about you. It's about what he's done for you. And every time I would come with a new fear, he would just point me back on that road to just trust in Jesus. And it worked for a bit, but then the reality of like trying to sum up trust in something I can't see, touch, feel, talk to just became a bit of a hardship, right? It felt like I had a relationship with someone that just just wasn't around. I'm like, I don't get, what am I trusting in? Am I believing in him to come through with something that I really need him for? Or am I trusting in him because his grace is covering apparently my wretchedness? Am I like, is it my morality? What am I trusting him in for? I'm trusting him to save me. I get that part. But on a day to day, what does this trust actually deliver? What is the outcome of me trusting him? Surely there should be a quid pro quo, right? There should be like something, if I'm trusting you, there should be a result of that trust being demonstrated in my life somehow. And quite frankly, I've had nothing but disaster. So I don't really know how or what I'm trusting him for. So, after a while, that just didn't fit. That just wasn't working for me anymore. And I'm like, I get what you're saying, but you can keep thinking it and convincing yourself mentally that he's there and that you're saved and that you're doing all the right things and whatever. You could do that, but there comes a point where reality hits and you're just like, actually, this doesn't work. This just doesn't work. So coming to the end of that now, obviously I stopped going to church. I did dabble in a couple of other churches. I did dabble in a couple of Bible studies just to see. I always found funny, when people talk about community, that they find it really hard, like to not have a community anymore when they've deconstructed. I was the opposite. I used to find community really hard because I used to find it really fake. And I'm really black and white, right? What you see is what you get. And I'm not one of these people that hide how I feel. And I never was. So people would come in and be like, yeah, things are so good. God's so good. And It was always positive. And, and I'd just be sitting there like, how was your week? Like, how are you really? Like, what is really going on? And I really felt like everyone had to put on a performance, because if you were seen as suffering, then, oh, hang on. Are you in God's will? Are you doing the right things? Why are you suffering? You shouldn't be suffering as a Christian. That was like when I was in the Armenian church, that was like very much like their bag. But then the Calvinist side was like, oh, you're suffering for the Lord, it's fine. But you always had like a degree of fakeness. And you didn't really know people. They didn't really know me. I didn't really know them. They were just part of our group, but there was no real deep friendship because everyone was scared to be themselves. Everyone was scared to really be who they really are, because I don't think they really knew who they were, because we are being told to be a way that God wants us to be. And a lot of the time that isn't really our true selves.
Yeah.
So,
that really popped out for me in Bible college. I've said this before, so I'll keep it really short, but I remember so many times when you would the men, like when the guys in the guys' dorms, we would get together for Bible studies sometimes, and it just shocked me that we were all known as like the preacher boys. We were the guys in the pastoral program to become the next generation of pastors, basically. And if you were to have brought us all, for example, to different churches, and the churches could have interviewed us, and we would have put on our best, we would have looked like the cream of the crop. These guys know the theology so well. They're so eloquent. They're going to be our preachers and so forth. And when you get those guys into the small group men's Bible studies, they're like, where it's just us. No one's watching. Like, let's just be honest. And they were honest. I will say they weren't fake in those groups. They were usually real. But the reality was, we're all struggling with our lust like crazy. And to the point of like, if they knew what was going on in our minds and our hearts, they would not think we're eligible to be pastors anymore.
Wow.
And so it's like this, and so you have to put on that mask. And it stood out to me so much. And just guys basically dying inside with guilt and frustration and feeling like they're the worst hypocrites on the planet, but using the theology to go back to it. Well, Paul says, I'm the chief of sinners and God's grace covers me, blah, blah, blah. And, though I fall, whatever, 7 times, I get up again, through God's grace. They would keep on finding ways to keep moving the ball forward, when in reality, they're totally living a facade, and they're about to go be pastors, and that church is going to basically hire the facade of them, not the real them. And they're going to eventually, you're going to burn out or something. Something's going to break. But it broke my heart. I mean, it really broke my heart to see it, because it was so consistent. And these guys behind closed doors would almost be like depressed that their walk with Christ did not feel real, but they had no choice but to keep doing it. I mean, not like one or two one-off guys, like all the guys across the board, they were all confessing this stuff. They felt like it was like they knew that God was real. They knew the gospel was real. They knew the Bible was God's word, but they felt like they were in utter defeat all the time. And that should have been a clue. Like, if the gospel changes lives and the Holy Spirit is in you, convicting you of sin, how in the world, the fact that you're 20 years old and your hormones are jumping, the Holy Spirit can't work on that? Like, he's got no power over your hormones? Like, are you kidding me?
No.
That doesn't make sense. And it was a serious time for me of not of deconstructing, but just of grieving the fact that these guys are truly broken. Like, if you get them behind closed doors, they're ready to cry. I mean, grown men who are across the board ready to cry over their walk with Christ, feeling fake because they were lusting all the time.
And that breaks my heart, because I think it really does. It really breaks my heart, because it's just a human experience, right? And you know what? It's funny, because people say, like, I always hear like call-in shows of where the argument is, oh, you just want to sin. You wanted to deconstruct because you want to sin. Actually, you know what? There's an element of me that, I just want to live my life. And if that means that I go out and I sleep with who I want to sleep with or do what I want to do, that's my prerogative. I need to learn I need to learn what I like, who I am, like how, you've lived your life a certain way, being dictated to for so many years. You don't even know who you are. You've made choices based on the fact that this faith has put you in this corner. And we've made choices that as a result have dictated our lives, and what paths we go. And actually now, while I'm still young, I'm alive and breathing, why can't I experience life that I want to experience? Why is it I don't care anymore. Because I don't believe it anymore. I don't believe in sin, or I don't think that I'm a sinner, a dirty sinner. I just think I'm human, just like everyone else is human. And you've got to learn by making your own mistakes in life, or just living and experiencing things and learning for yourself. You don't become like emotionally intelligent or aware if you don't go through things, and I think like putting people in a box like that, and this whole lust thing with men in the church is like literally such a massive thing. And the pornography, like I remember like all the men being like sat down and spoken to about pornography, about how it was terribly sinful, and if you do this, and I remember like my husband at the time coming away and being like, I literally feel like I've been battered, like broken, like proper beaten up by, and he's like, I'm not even doing this stuff, and yet I feel so condemned that if I was to, I'd be absolutely like, I'd be full of shame, and that's what it does. It just creates such a negative impact. Like, it's just so unhealthy, so unhealthy. And I think now, like looking back, there's so much that is so unhealthy in when you're in that faith or in that mindset. And I just think people need to come away from it. You'll never be you. You'll never really know who you are until you just live your life how you want to live it. Obviously, I'm not saying go out and like, do crazy stuff, but you have to just live and just experience things. Because I think for me, like this faith has really damaged like so much of how I, even just in relationships, in you know, because I was always fearful, really insecure, always needed reassurance, needed, you know, and even not just like in a relationship, but even in my work, in my like my bosses, I might be like, oh, you know, is he off with me, or have I done something to upset him, you know? And I'm like, oh, no, you know, this is stuff that's happened to me. This is my trauma. This isn't, you know, I have to ground myself in reality as well. But I've had to do a lot of work, you know, years later. I've had to do a lot of work on myself to get me to a point where I can just be comfortable in my own skin and be confident in myself, but also like
Yeah.
to be measured about things. I'm not going to be like, I'm not a cocky idiot. Like, you know, I'm not, if I, you know, if I think I've done something wrong, or if I feel like there's something off, then I'll pick up on it. But it's not always like everyone's kind of against you or pushing you away or making you feel like you're less than, you know, because of the experience that I've had. So, you know, I
Yeah.
think for me, like coming away from when I decided like enough's enough, I'm done. I'm just done listening to all this. I want to start listening to other things. And then I started listening to um debates on Christianity. I found a guy called David C. Smalley. I don't know if you've ever
That rings a
come
bell.
across him. He's a
I don't know.
comedian,
Okay.
American comedian, but he done the thing called Dogma Debate, and he's got like a podcast, and he interviews Christians and he challenges them on scripture. Like he's really well versed. He really knows like the Bible. So like he was the first person I came across that actually started questioning people, like real life scenarios. And I'm like, oh, this is brilliant. Like I'm actually hearing like the other side now.
Yeah.
And then I kind of found a couple of other channels, like Forrest Valkai, he's a biologist. Love
Yeah.
him, love him. I started learning about biology, started learning about evolution, flipping in my 40s. This is mad. Like how is it as a person in their 40s, I'm having to re-educate myself because I wasn't taught any of that. I wasn't allowed to believe it. I wasn't allowed to believe in evolution. I wasn't allowed to believe about the Big Bang. It was all about creationism. You know, you know the drill, right? But now I've had to literally learn everything from scratch. And I'm still learning. I'm still like, you know, I'll still be like, oh, but okay, I don't quite understand how that works. Like, you know, I really believed in creation because I really would see, again, like the beauty in things and that, how does that work? Or, you know, oh, there's got to be a designer. There's got to be an intelligent design here, you know. But now, obviously, I'm listening to these guys that really understand, you know, evolution and biology, Aaron Ra, you know, just listening to these guys, and they'll talk about scripture and then they'll talk about reality and bring it all together. And you're like, oh, okay, that makes so much more sense now. Now I understand it. You know, I'm not just believing something because I'm hearing it. I'm actually seeing evidence for it. So now I'm like, show me the evidence. Everything is evidence-based. I'm not believing any shit no more unless I see evidence for it. That's
Exactly. Well,
basically how I do it now.
well, it's a good segue to the part where I wanted to kind of bring us to of, and by the way, I know there's some comments. I will get to your comments in just a few minutes, but thank you for your patience. I appreciate you all chiming in. But could you take us to that moment when you were at that crux where you said, you know, there's some serious issues here. I don't know if I believe anymore. What was that? What were those final months or weeks like? And how did you finally get to a point of, you know, what I would describe as escaping Bible prison?
um, it was a slow process for me. I think it was more just taking time to listen to, like I say, the counter side of things. So listen to like the atheists, listen to the agnostics, um, give me a different thing to put my mind into. Let me understand the the flip side of what I never understood before or never knew before. And I think the biggest thing for me was fear of hell, right? And I'm not going to lie, I still have an element of it that does still freak me out a little bit from time to time. And I have heard about, you know, where it came from, how it came about, that it was man-made, and da 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 da. And I get all of that. And actually, one of the biggest things, sorry, I should say, one of the biggest things that really, really was a massive eye opener for me was that the Gospels were not written by the author of the Gospels. I did not know that, right? I did not know that. And when I started to research how the Bible was put together, and, you know, the fact that we have no original manuscripts, and in fact, one, I think, was it like I can't remember what it's called, P40 or something, like I think it's a part of John, like it's on like a credit card size piece of like paper, and I'm like, wow, we got a whole gospel from that like tiny little piece of paper, like, and that, you know, it was rewritten and rewritten and rewritten, and we, you know, that they wasn't even the original gospels, and like the woman that got condemned in adultery was added years later, was a, you know, forgery. And I'm just like, what? I never knew any of this. So like those things, you know, like really started to make sense to me. And I'm like, you know what? The Bible is man-made. Like, it's written by a man. It's not written, I know we say it's God inspired, but how? Like, it's still written by a dude. Like, that's the bottom line. You can say it's inspired, but you still got a dude writing it. And we don't even know what person wrote it because we've got no evidence of who they were. Oh, but we've got eyewitnesses that Jesus lived. Yeah, but we have no accounts of those eyewitnesses. We've just been told there were eyewitnesses. Who were those eyewitnesses? You know, there's just so many holes when you start to like really look into it, and like rather than just take it and accept it at face value, you start unpicking it, and you're like, actually, I never questioned any of this stuff. I just believed it. So now I'm like, no, I need to have evidence for everything. So yeah, it took time. Listening to these guys, like I say, the YouTube channels that I found. Mind Shift is also brilliant. A guy called Brendan, fantastic guy, really helps.
I was just listening to him today.
Thank you. I love him, so good. So some of those guys, you know, Matt Delahunty that does the, you know, the debates and stuff like that. All those guys, I think that's really helped me just become more and more confident in the position that I hold now. And, you know, I wouldn't say like, I'm not going to say like I'm an atheist, right? Because I think ultimately no one knows 1,000,000%. I would say I'm an agnostic atheist. Right. And I would say that I don't know what I don't know, right? But right now, I don't see the evidence for it. And I never saw the evidence in my life. It's not about the book or the belief system. I never saw evidence of God in my life, in my family's life, in people around me that are Christians' lives. They all look the same. None of them, I can say, have the Holy Spirit. They all behave the same way. They all act the same way. There's nothing there that determines that this is a real live thing. I see none of it. So whilst that's the thing, I will just can continue and living my life as I want to live it.
Yeah, it's a great point. Say the last thing again.
So I said, and that's just being free of all the burden and the crap that you've learned, you know, just being free of it, and not it doesn't affect me anymore. I feel like a different person now compared to what I was 10 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great point to you just said a minute ago too, of it's like, another way of putting it would be, if your God was completely real in one possible way of interpreting your life, and God was completely mythology in another way of interpreting it, the outcome either way looks identical in their lives. This could be just people making stuff up and having emotions that they're producing because they're just, you know, they're being brainwashed and they're being indoctrinated. Our churches have the groupthink, and we have the enthusiasm of the church services and so forth, and you just convince yourself it's all real. Well, that looks identical to if it was real versus mythology. They both, the outcome is the same, and you can't tell the difference. And that was my experience too. Like, I can't tell the difference if God is real or God is fake, and this is all man-made. Either way, I could easily say either one of those explanations might be right. When it's that close, I mean, there should be like worlds apart. Like the evidence heavily leads to he's real.
Yes.
When you can't tell the difference between this could be real, but I could be wrong, and he could be made up. It could be just as fake as I think the Hindu gods are.
Yeah.
Then you know what? If it's that close to call, that's not a good place to be.
No.
Yeah, it's just crazy that we didn't see it before. Well, in terms of, I wanted to ask you to think about a question. I'm going to ask you, but I want to go through some comments and give you a minute to think about it. But the two questions that I wanted to ask you to think about are, number one, how has the healing been going at this point? Now that you're a few years removed from that, right? How many years has it been?
Probably about 7-8 years now.
Okay, so you've had some time, about the same as me. So you've had a few years to think about this and heal. How is the healing going? And then, in a similar vein, for someone that is in the hardest part of it, where it's still very just dark and painful, it's really cutting them up inside, and they're very much deconstructing, but not deconverted. They're just tearing the Bible apart, but they're not sure where it goes from here. What would you say to them in their darkest hour? So I'll give you a minute to think about that. I'm going to go through some comments. Fire Unbeliever Noel says, Christiana, I echo your concerns about being terrified that if you left the church, you'd become some evil, destructive person. It's yet another tool of coercion to keep us from believing we were good.
Yeah,
Exactly.
100%.
Especially when you're in a tight-knit community, as it's not just Sunday, it's pretty much every day of the week. Yeah. So many tough situations at once, so hard leaving those communities as well. Yeah, very much so. HVAC, thank you so much for your super chat. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you both for your stories. You validated for me what I felt in the Calvinist church. I never felt close to God. It also turned me against myself, constantly monitoring myself. I either spiked or gave myself intense OCD.
Oh God, that breaks my heart, because I know exactly how the person feels. That's exactly what happened to me, and that's what I mean. It just the thoughts, the constant self-criticism and the monitoring, and then like constantly being so hyper vigilant of everything that you do and say, it messes with your brain so much. And I hope that this person has left the faith. I mean, that, you don't need this. You don't need this to tell you that you're a good person. This is the thing. I think a lot of it is it's actually makes you worse. It makes you ill, because you're constantly like, am I doing the right thing? Am I, you just never feel enough. You never feel close to God. You never feel accepted by him, loved by him. And I think that's when you start to understand, you know what, it's not me. It's not me that doesn't feel like that. I'm not feeling it because my brain is logical and is actually telling me that there is no, there's no truth here. I wish I realized it years before. I wish it just sunk in that actually the reason you feel like that, Chrissy, is because he's not real. Then it probably would have saved me years of heartache. But I so believed and wanted to believe that he was real that, I stuck at it. But, years later, fast forward, away from all of the madness, and my family is still Christians. Like, my dad's still involved. My sister runs a church in San Diego with her husband. Like, I still have people in my life that are Christians. But I distance myself from those conversations because I don't want to ever feel like I'm back in that place of monitoring myself and feeling fear. I've worked so hard to not be that person. I'm like, I don't ever want to go back to it again, because there's triggers as well, by the way. It's not something that even though you heal, you still get triggered. Like, someone can say something, I could have, like, my dad was here the other week and he mentioned something about, he brought something up about some spiritual comment, and it really triggered me. It's like reawakening an old deep wound, and I have to kind of then work on myself to, like, breathe and just remember he's still in that place. He may never see what I see, and these people, and I feel for people that are still very heavily involved, because I do think that everyone is looking for something. They want comfort, they want peace, they want joy, they want the things that make them happy in, by believing in this, which I completely understand. It's, why would you not? But it's when it damages you, when it gets to that point where it really becomes a problem and you're damaging others, you know, like you're judging people, you're constantly like looking down on people, or you're trying to change people because you think that they need to be saved. There's just a pressure that no one needs. You don't need it. I mean, I certainly didn't need it. And I'm like, I'm so glad I don't have to worry about counting who I saved today. Well, not me who saved, but, you know, preaching to the lost.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. Well, thank you again, HVAC. Really appreciate your support. Susanna in Scotland again, I found no real connections between my Christian friends, as everyone was almost forced to love each other with the love of the Lord. I'm absolutely at that stage. Who am I without the Christian narrative? It's been so strange to be on the find yourself path.
Yeah.
Well done, Christiana, for getting to that comfortable stage with yourself. Sounds like a great place to be on that journey myself, re-educating myself, and I've just turned 50. Yeah.
Never
It's
too
amazing.
late. Never too late.
Hey, Amanda, great to see you. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. Mark Richter, also there in the UK. Oh, we missed him. Thanks, Jim. Good night, everyone. Bedtime for this Welsh kid. Sounds good. Excuse me. Susanna, I'm not sure if she's still here, but yep, finding out our gospel authors aren't really the authors, etc. Yep. Just came from watching a Matt Dillahunty call. Awesome. Yep. He was instrumental in my deconversion. I actually just got to interview Seth Andrews the other day. He was also instrumental in mine.
I watched it.
Really cool.
Yeah,
that was a privilege. Yeah, he's very cool.
Yeah, really, I like him a lot.
It's kind of weird to interview someone who literally, like, he was one of the major reasons I left, and it's just like, and I just feel like I would have wanted to tell him that years ago, but I'm glad I finally got a chance to. Andrea says, you're extremely strong, resilient, and amazing. Keep going and keep buying cats. Very nice. You know what I say to my kids? You're going to hate this. This is a joke, okay? Don't take it seriously, but I say, I love cats. They taste just like chicken. And they say, oh, Daddy, no, don't say that. Cold Iron Gaming. When I first started calling myself an atheist, I'd use the term pragmatic atheist, since from looking at the world, it looked indistinguishable from there being no God. Yeah, I like that. Well, we've gone here for 2 hours, so we're going to bring it to a wrap up. Can you tell us, how has the healing been going? And what would you say to someone that's going through the hardest parts of deconstruction?
Ooh, the healing, yeah, like I say, like I had a lot. I had therapy, and I think for me, the healing came from understanding what happened to me. I think a lot. If I had the understanding of what was going on when it was going on, I think it wouldn't have got to the point that it got to. But I didn't have the awareness of what was happening to me at the time, because we spiritualized everything. So now I've made sense of that. So that part of me, I've got closure on as to why it happened. And now I just want to use that experience to help other people so they don't go through it. So yeah, healing has been amazing because I feel free. I've never been so free in all my life. I'm free to be me, free to be funny, free to do what I want, say what I want, tell coarse jokes. Oh no, that's terrible. No coarse jokes. But I just the fact that I don't have to worry about whether I'm being judged or not, whether I'm going to hell or not, like I don't have that burden anymore. So freedom is amazing. It's wonderful. Anyone that doesn't have it should absolutely go for it, because it is just enjoy your life. Like, life is short, life is short. It's too short to be worrying about the rights and wrongs of what we do with this faith. We've just got to live our lives,
Yeah, I'll drink to that. It is way too short.
The other question, what would I say to someone that's in the thick of it? I would say, do what you need to do to get you to the point of peace and finding comfort and taking away that confusion. And that might look different for different people. For me, it was finding, like I say, the different people to listen to that gave me the alternative, like, the reality of the world, the real evidence-based stuff, the science, the facts on things that really, really helped me. to have that loosen the grip of what I was brought up in, because it's so embedded into our DNA, right? So I think if that's your path, then maybe just keep looking into things that are going to help you get stronger and stronger in the other side of the, rather than have the faith to lean on. Ground yourself in facts, ground yourself in reality and what's actually true. And I think that's the thing. Go for truth, evidence, 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 question everything. Don't accept what people say. And I think that's one thing I would absolutely learn from it. And, and also, if you need help, like, as in, like, get therapy. Like, I got therapy. I spoke to someone that really helped me understand, my stress. It's CPTSD, understood the psychosis, all of that. That was from getting therapy. That really helped me. If you need medication, you need medication, right? That's the other thing as well. Like, I was on anti-anxiety medication when my mum passed away, because it completely threw me. But that saved my life. Genuinely, that saved my life, because I don't know what I would have done if it weren't for that. That kept me sane. So, if you need to do that, do it. There's no harm. There's no shame in it. So I think that's the other thing. The Christian church tends to demonize counseling, demonize medication, and that's just so not right. So not right. You need to do what you need to do to help yourself, because God ain't gonna do it.
Yeah, that was the kind of church I grew up in. Depression medication was like maybe for the person hearing voices in their head, but where it's just like extreme. If you don't give them medicine, they're going to go hurt themselves or something. But otherwise, if you're just having a bad day and you're struggling, like, that depression that's part of learning to receive the joy of the Lord. So don't confuse the two. And that message got just pushed on so many people that probably, arguably, at least for a season, could have really benefited from at least talking to a doctor about it and saying maybe, just maybe, some medicine would help just to get through hard times or someone passing or whatever. But, well, I think it's great advice. I'm so glad that you escaped. Obviously, that's always the big point. I'm so glad that you got to a point where you're healthier and healthier than ever. I really do hope that it continues to the point where you just look back and feel like sometimes I look back at my life and I think that feels so much in the past that I almost forget it's part of my life. I'm like, oh yeah, that did happen, didn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I hope it's so, like, the pain is so far back behind you.
Yeah. But that's good. That's a good thing, right? Because then we can just move on and you can heal. And then, like you say, it's better that it's a memory than something that's like, you're living now, know?
Yeah. Exactly. Well, before I wrap this up, is there anything else on your mind or from your story, anything else we didn't get to that you wanted to make sure you added?
Not really. I think we've kind of covered most things. I think, I just think people, like, it's very difficult because there's different denominations and people have got different beliefs about different things, right? But I think ultimately, people want to pick and choose what parts of Jesus they want to believe in, the good parts. But he was loving. He said this, he said that. Yeah, he said some good things, but he also said some terrible things as well. So I think, you have to look at this seriously and be like, actually, you know what, in the grand scheme of things, what bits am I actually taking? Like, what's the truth here? Is this doing me any good? Like, what am I getting out of this? And I think ultimately, just be free from it, because it's just, the stress that it puts on people is just not worth it. It's just not worth it.
Yeah. And you realize I used the illustration before, like, if you had been just walking down the street, you'd never had any thoughts, you're just living your life and just everything's fine, and you come across some homeless guy that happens to have a bunch of bad checks that he had stolen from someone or something. They're already canceled at the bank, but you don't know it. And he convinces you that he's very wealthy and he gives you a check for £1 billion or something. And he's like, but wait a year before you cash it. But in a year, cash it. And I really want to bless you. And here's £1 billion. Go live your life. And you keep it in the drawer and you wait a year, like he says. You go to the bank eventually and you go to cash it. And they say, hey, I'm sorry, but this guy's written checks like this all over town. They're not real. This is fake. So I'm sorry. This is not worth anything. Well, you would have spent that year thinking to yourself, "Oh, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take my family vacation. I'm gonna buy, help my parents pay off their house, whatever. We're all gonna get medical care we need." And you just build it up in your head. It's gonna be so great when you get there. And then you find out that you don't have it. It's like, "Oh, this really stinks," and you feel so sad. You feel so sad about it. Like, I lost so much. And you have to remind yourself, like, "No, you didn't lose it. You never had it."
Mm.
And it makes you ache for a life where what would my life have been like if I had never been deceived? What would my
Yes.
life have been like if I had had my autonomy and all the information I would have needed, as to not be forced into this through the threats of hell and angels and demons and God's displeasure? What if I had just been told from an earlier age, like, "Hey, let's not talk about the theology. Let's talk about where this stuff came from and how the story evolved over time, and then you make your own decision about whether you want to believe it."
Yeah.
But none of that was given to you, and there was no autonomy, there was no agency, there was not nowhere near enough information, and there was no sense of you can believe this or you can't, and you're still okay. It was like, if you don't believe it, you're not okay.
Yeah.
But you just ache for that sense of, like, what would it have been like if that homeless guy had never sold me on this, told me I had £1 billion in that check? And it's a real healing journey. But when you get us to past a certain point, you're like, you know what? It is what it is. It happened. It hurt. It really did hurt. But this was a mind game. This was a mind fuck. And he got that homeless guy got me. He got me good. I'll admit it. He duped me. I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. But you know what? I got to get to a point where I say, if you need to act as if it never happened, in a sense, because otherwise it'll just eat at you, and just say, you know what, it is what it is. But from this point on, I'm going to act like Christianity never had my heart. I want to know what it's like to be a human without mythology as my default. And boy, when you get to that and just let it sink in for a while, and especially with evolution, you think, I am a primate. I am a primate, and the issue of lust. Like, I'm a primate. Primates lust. It's a good thing. You would not want primates that don't lust. Our we would stop reproducing very quickly as a species if lust went around. You would not want that. You don't want men that don't lust. That's not the right choice. Believe me, a very bad outcome if you took that away.
Well, women lust as well. It's not just a man thing. It's like, it's always put on like, oh, the man does that. Well, flipping, some women are way worse than the men. So.
Yes, but I mean, you wouldn't want a human race that did not lust.
No.
We would die out very quickly. But it's just nice to think that this is our time to come back to ourselves and say it's time to reclaim our identities and to figure out who we maybe could have been, but at least who we are now, and to say from this point on, like you're saying, I'm going to look for the evidence. I'm going to go where the truth takes me, and that's beautiful stuff. So I'm so glad you got out. I really appreciate it, and you're very articulate. I was going to say, if you ever decide to start a YouTube channel, let me know. I think you'd be good at it. So.
Thank you so much. I'm probably not. I've got enough going on in my life.
Yeah, I hear you.
I couldn't handle the trolls as well. That would kill me. I just like, oh God, too much. So I don't know how you do it. So hat off to you for doing what you do as well.
Yeah, you definitely have to have a thick skin before you do this kind of thing. But yeah. Well, I'll just wrap up by saying we've been speaking with Chrissy Angelides. Did I get it right? Angelides?
Yeah, well done.
Okay, very good. Chrissy Angelides, thank you so much. So great to meet you. Look forward to chatting again sometime. But thank you so much for staying up late as well. Oh my goodness, it's after midnight there. Thank you for the late night time. And let's do it again sometime. But thank you again for everything tonight.
Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.